Hello and welcome to Beyond the Corporate Hangover with me, Emily Derschler. If you are a woman in your 30s or beyond and have left a lengthy spell in corporate to set up an online business and are feeling stuck, I'm here to help. In this podcast, we'll be digging into what it takes to go from employee to entrepreneur and build an amazing business that showcases your unique expertise. We'll look at the challenges women face, those limiting beliefs and behaviours from our corporate life that keep holding us back, and I'll provide practical ways to help you move forwards as a confident business owner. So if you are feeling overwhelmed, worried or confused about how to make your business a success, and you want to shake off the corporate hangover, tune in every fortnight. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello and welcome to day 3 of Beyond the Corporate Hangover. Now, I've been having some really interesting conversations recently with lots of different women at different stages in their entrepreneurial journey. Some have left corporate relatively recently and others have been in business for many, many years. And I've been learning all about them and what their experiences were at the time of leaving corporate. And they were very different in many ways, but also so many similarities between them. And I wanted to pick up on one of those similarities today because I find it really, really interesting. So today's episode is all about circumstances, the circumstances that we face when we leave corporate and how those circumstances actually then directly influence and impact the way we approach our new life, our new role, our new existence as a business owner. So I always thought that a lot of business owners started their businesses because they felt compelled by a higher purpose or a real passion to really kind of do something amazing. And that is true. However, nobody that I've spoken to so far has had that drive and purpose and loved their job and said, I really love my job, I love my colleagues, I've got great money coming in, everything's going really, really well, but I want to start my own business and that's what I'm going to do. Nobody at time of recording. However, there have been many women who've had this drive and this passion and this purpose, but whose circumstances have almost pushed them into being a business owner. So, for example, redundancy has been a big factor. Health and changing personal circumstances as well has been another massive factor. And the third one has been this growing sense of disillusionment and frustration and even starting to really hate your workplace or your bosses or your colleagues or all of the above. So typically there's been either quite a significant change or in circumstances or a change in emotional state. And this has been the driver. So I found this really, really interesting because for those people who are almost pushed into entrepreneurship, it can come as a bit of a shock to the system. For many years, you've been this particular person, you've had this identity, and all of a sudden that is no longer there. So in the last episode we talked about structure and routine and the kind of logistical elements of being a business owner, but now we're talking about what the difference is mentally from going from being in a work environment to all of a sudden being essentially on your own in many ways. And yeah, it's a really interesting topic. So if you've come from corporate, you will have been known as someone. So typically what I mean by that is you are known as your job title. You are a head of this or a whatever team leader or a director, whatever it may have been. You will have had a job title. And with that job title comes a job description. So when you're in corporate, you are essentially a job description. You have your job title, you have what you're responsible for, and that is it. You're not really anything else. And that can be really comforting in some ways because you know what you're doing, you know who you're doing it for, you know where your job role starts and ends, you know when you have to hand things over. It's fairly clear a lot of the time. And leaving corporate and going to do your own thing means not necessarily redefining who you are, but perhaps there's a sense of rediscovery because you're no longer that two-dimensional job description. Not only because you now have to wear all the other hats in your business, but also because you don't have that label attached to you. You are you. And that's really, really freeing. But it also is quite confusing because your sense of identity has suddenly disappeared. This is where a lot of doubts can creep in, where you can suddenly start thinking, well, I've worked in this company, for example, for so many years, and I don't really know who I am anymore. I don't know how to get out there and be me because I've been so conditioned to be something else, someone else, to behave in a certain way, to speak in a certain way, to perform in a certain way. That no longer fits because once you've left that role and that company and that environment, it's like a square peg in a round hole. It's not going to work. So how on earth do you kind of get out of that and into the person that you're now supposed to be? And it's something that in these conversations that these women actually genuinely struggled with. It's almost like sitting at a blank page and going, right, how would I describe myself? It's really hard to do. Not only because you've gone from that environment, but I think we find it hard to talk about ourselves in general, and especially in a really positive and uplifting way, which demonstrates our expertise, which demonstrates our uniqueness, which demonstrates our brilliance. We're very, very tough on ourselves, and we're very unlikely to naturally go, oh, I'm brilliant at this and I can do that and I'm amazing at the other. It feels really unnatural. But actually now as a business owner, you need to embrace that. You need to embrace that because if you don't, somebody else will. And somebody else will be that very magnetic, very compelling, very interesting person while you're in the shadows going, oh, I couldn't possibly tell people how great I am. But you really, really need to do that. And that needs to become part of your identity now. So it's really, really important that you learn how to do that. But also, it's important to remember what you've learned from the corporate world that you can actually keep. Because leaving corporate doesn't necessarily mean you have to think of it as removing handcuffs and suddenly being free from all the chains and all the rules and regulations and policies and all of that. Obviously, there is a lot of that. But remember all of those amazing things that you learnt in your corporate life. Those brilliant skills that you've picked up, that you've honed, that you've refined, that you've become really adept at, that you've become brilliant at, that can actually serve you in your life as an entrepreneur. For example, dealing with difficult customers. And believe me, you will have difficult customers. Everybody has challenging people that they work with, and knowing how to manage those relationships is quite possibly something that you learned in your corporate life. Adaptability, persistence, resilience, mindset. There are a lot of positive things from the corporate world that you can take with you as long as you recognize that those things are helping you and not hindering you. So with mindset, for example, the mindset of achievement, absolutely. But the mindset of making money and hitting KPIs, Probably not so much, because it's a different approach when you're owning your own business. So, of course, there are lots of things that you really, really should hang on to with both hands and never let go when you leave corporate. But one of the struggles, I think, is actually identifying what are those things that are truly going to help the new me, the me that isn't that two-dimensional job description, and which are the ones that I'm still hanging on to as part of that previous identity, that previous life. And this can take some reflection and it can take some work to separate what is good and what is not so good. And there's a lot of trial and error with this. So trust me when I tell you that everybody is still figuring that out. Everybody who's spent a significant time in the corporate world is still figuring that out to some extent. Nobody has all the answers, especially in the first months or even years. We often just react to the circumstance in front of us, which is not wrong, by the way. We all do it and we all have to. But take some time to try to figure out and try to think about, okay, this is my circumstance, this is what's changed, this is the life I had, and this is the life I now have. What are those things that I need to abandon now because I'm not going back? I'm not going to be that person anymore. What needs to stay in the past now? And what can I carry with me that is going to be of benefit to me as a business owner, as an entrepreneur? It is a tough thing to do, but when circumstances dictate the course of our lives to an extent, that's where it should stop. We then determine how we manage those circumstances and how we move forwards and how we embrace this next chapter. So that's really what I wanted this episode to be about, is accepting that things change and that you can become a different, truer, even more brilliant version of yourself as a business owner, and that you can still keep those parts of you that matter and that will serve you in the future. So that's it for this episode. I hope it's been useful for you, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.